The UFC's Century events, UFC 100 and 200, featured some of the sport's biggest names. What do you think UFC 300 is going to look like? I'm Wyatt, and this is Fight Society. With Conor McGregor now allegedly in the testing pool for USADA as of this week, it's looking increasingly likely that we're going to see Conor McGregor main event UFC 300. Conor is going to have to fight somebody at UFC 300. And the reason that I say somebody is because I'm not really sold that Conor and Michael Chandler are actually going to end up fighting. Although Conor McGregor, Michael Chandler, and Dana White have all said that Michael Chandler is next for Conor McGregor, I have a sneaking suspicion that we're going to see Conor versus Nate Diaz at UFC 300. If that's going to be our main event, we got to think about what is the rest of UFC 300 going to look like. If Conor is the UFC 300 main event, it's almost a guarantee that we won't see any title fights at UFC 300. This is because champions get pay-per-view points on top of their regular fight pay. And if Conor's on the card and it's UFC 300, this card is going to do a ton of buys. And the UFC is not going to want to give pay-per-view points to champions aside from what they're already paying Conor to headline. So basically, if they put Conor as the main event, it's going to be Conor and a bunch of good fights, great fights most likely, but you're not going to see any belts on the line at UFC 300 if Conor's the main event. I'm not going to lie, though. A big part of me hopes that they put Conor on 299 or UFC 301 because I want space in that budget for UFC 300 to really be the legendary event that it should be. It's one of the century events. It should be a huge, huge event, multiple titles with meaningful fights. I'm not saying that Conor fights mean nothing, but in terms of integrity and competitiveness and rankings, Conor versus Michael Chandler or Conor versus Nate Diaz or Conor versus whoever as the UFC 300 main event is basically a legends fight. It's not going to mean anything in terms of a title picture or belts. So I really hope that they move Conor to 299 or 301 to allow multiple title fights that really mean something and show where the sport is right now. So let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think Conor McGregor is going to be the UFC 300 main event? Do you want him to, or do you want to see him pushed to a different card and have multiple titles and big fights on the line at UFC 300? Now, I'm not completely sure what they're going to do with UFC 300 or Conor's next fight. I have some ideas, but I'm not sure. I want to hear what you guys think in the comments. So let me know down below who you think is going to be the UFC 300 main event and what's the card going to look like? And who do you think Conor is going to fight in his next fight? And when do you think Conor's next fight is going to be, if ever? If you like this video and you want more content just like this, remember to like this video, subscribe, and ring the bell to stay up to date with our latest videos. If you want more content from me, go check out my weekly comedy podcast, the Hissyfit podcast, and go check out my personal channel, Wyatt's World.